Welcome to the video solutions for the NCFE December 2019 Functional Skills English Level 2 Writing Exam Model Solutions, where we'll go through the questions and then you can get a better idea of what you want your answers to look like, as well as what to look out for when planning your answers. So for the writing exam, you'll have two activities. So activity 1 is write an article, and you have 22 marks available for this. So the task is here. So next year your organisation will be celebrating 25 years since it was formed. You've been asked to help organise the anniversary celebrations to mark this important event. You've decided to write an article for the organisation's newsletter, detailing activities that you have planned and asking for other ideas from colleagues or fellow students. And your article should be within this word limit here, so between 200 and 300 words. So let's break this question down and have a think about what sort of things we need to include. So we need to write an article for the organisation's newsletter. So the form here, or the text type we need to be writing, is an article. So we need to make sure that we're formatting our text correctly. So we need a heading, subheadings to split up the text, perhaps an author attribution and a date. You could also add bullet points to sort of further split up your writing. And in terms of audience, we're writing for the organisation's newsletter. So who's going to be reading that? Well, it's going to be your fellow colleagues. So the audience here is your work colleagues. So with that in mind, we want to be writing fairly formally. It's a professional environment, it's an article, which is usually quite a professional text type. We might be able to throw in some sort of more colloquial punctuation, such as exclamation marks, to convey an excited tone, but on the whole we want to make sure that we're remaining pretty formal. In terms of content, we need to make it known that it's 25 years since the organisation was formed, and that's why this celebration is occurring. And we need to organise the anniversary celebration. So we need to say what's going to be happening in terms of the celebrations. And we need to detail what activities we've planned, and we need to ask for further ideas. So they're the main things you need to include in your writing. So we might want to use different subheadings to split that up, for example. So if we have a look at the mark scheme for activity 1, so your article, and we can see we're marked on these different subject content reference points. So we've got content and detail, format and structure, language and register, and organisation. And then you're also marked on your spelling, punctuation and grammar. So if we have a look at content and detail, so we can see that you just get 1 mark for simply staying within that word count range. So it's really important that you write enough, but also that you're not writing reams and reams and reams, and it's much too long. So we've got 5 marks in total here for content and detail, and 1 mark is simply just for staying within that word count range. And then ideally we want to pick up ideally another 4 marks. Maybe we're aiming for 3 or 4 more marks to get that top band. So for those extra 4 marks, we need to make sure that our writing is detailed and communicates information, ideas and opinions clearly, coherently and effectively throughout. So you want to make sure that you're using paragraphs to do this, perhaps bullet points may also be effective. So the text also fully meets the needs of the purpose and audience. So why are we writing, our purpose and the audience. So in this case we are writing to inform our colleagues on activities planned for 25 years of the organisation of being up and running. And then the audience for this would be a relatively formal audience. So remember, we're writing an article for the organisation's newsletter, so we need to make sure that it's relatively formal as well. So the next part of the mark scheme talks about format and structure. So for this you need to make sure that you're matching the format to the appropriate text type in the question. So for this one we need to make sure it matches an article. and we can see for 3 marks we need to have a clear and effective structure with appropriate format which allows for clear communication. And here we can see what the appropriate format entails. So for an article we need a heading, subheading, a strapline, which is just sort of a bit underneath the main heading which gives more information. Bullet points are always useful to include, the mark schemes always like bullet points, author attribution and columns. So next we've got language and register. So the mark scheme wants you to, for 2 marks, use language and register which is fully suited to the audience and purpose. So remember, the audience is just who we're writing for, so in this case it's your colleagues, and the purpose is why you're writing, which in this case is to inform people of what you're doing to celebrate 25 years of the organisation being up and running. So for this, I would say you need to use a relatively formal register. You're in a workplace environment. Also, an appropriate perspective would be first person, as you are talking to your colleagues directly, but you can also use third person as well. So next we've got organisation. So for 3 marks here, the exam board want you to use paragraphs appropriately, so to split your writing up. They want you to construct complex sentences consistently and accurately. And they also want you to use organisational markers effectively to add clarity and establish cohesion. So, complex sentences are any sentence that contains an independent and a dependent clause. So in other words, we've got an independent clause in a sentence, which is some information in your sentence, and then a dependent clause would be some extra information that's added. But the key here is to structure your sentence in a way that the dependent clause would not make sense if the independent clause wasn't there to support it. So an example would be, after Jack ate a giant cookie, he got a stomachache. So we'd put the comma after cookie, and the subordinate or dependent clause, he got a stomachache, would not make sense without the previous clause. Organisational markers then are just any words or phrases that help break up your writing and increase the cohesion of it. This can also be things like bullet points, headings, subheading, anything that organise your writing and make it sort of easier to read. So you're also marked on spelling, punctuation and grammar, and you get a possibility of 3 marks for each of these. So you need to make sure that you're spelling words correctly, you're using a range of punctuation correctly, and that your sentences are structured correctly, so correct subject-verb agreement, consistent use of tense, and indefinite and definite articles as well. So here we've got an example answer by a student, so we'll have a read through this and then we'll think about how they've hit each of the marking criteria here. 25 years of incredible cupcakes. Our organisation is celebrating 25 years since its creation. This is a momentous occasion for us as we are celebrating the history and legacy of such an amazing cupcake shop, which serves not only Leeds but surrounding areas like Harrogate and Bradford. To celebrate properly, we are taking the whole day on Friday to celebrate in style. Key details: location, Dawlish, Warren Beach. Date: Friday 27th of May 2022. Time: 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Activities planned for the day. We have multiple fun activities planned for this important event, starting with a trip to the beach during the day with complimentary fish and chips, to either have some fun paddleboarding or enjoy a relaxing sunbathe and beach games. A barbecue will then take place with vegetarian and vegan options, and desserts will, of course, be available. Where do you come in? Well, besides turning up and celebrating, we could not have got to this incredible milestone without you, our colleagues and friends. Because of this, we are looking for you to send us some of your ideas as to what else you would like to do on the anniversary celebration day. Your opinions matter the most to us, and we want you to know how valued you are as a team member. Remember, be creative. The budget for this celebration is not an issue, as we are so proud of everyone for getting to this point. Any and all ideas will be considered. So here is our model answer. So we've got an article and we've got different formatting features and organisational features that fit with an article. So we've got our headline here, 25 years of incredible cupcakes. We've got a further subheading and then sort of a list. So we've got different location, date and time here, followed by colons to split up the information for the reader. We've got further subheadings here, so activities planned for the day and where do you come in. The use of the question mark here involves the reader, sort of makes them feel like they're being spoken to directly. The student has also directly answered the question, so we've got 25 years here, which is linked to the question, so your organisation will be celebrating 25 years since it was formed, and we're helping to organise the anniversary celebrations and writing an article detailing activities you've planned and asking for other ideas. So we've got activities planned here, indicated by this subheading. And then we've got where do you come in, asking for different ideas from colleagues and friends, which is here. We can also see how the student has taken into account the audience, purpose and aim. So they've used first person perspective, including the collective pronoun we. So to celebrate properly, we are taking the holiday on Friday to celebrate in style. So this is really making the audience feel involved and welcome at the event. They're also using exciting language to drum up enthusiasm and persuade people to come. So for example, we've got enjoy a relaxing sunbathe and beach games. We've also got exclamation marks here, so with complimentary fish and chips, giving it an exciting tone and persuasive. We've also got the direct pronoun your here, so directly addressing the reader. Your opinions matter the most to us and we want you to know how valued you are as a team member, so it's really including the reader in the article. We've also got correct grammar in the sense that all our place names, any dates or days of the week are all capitalised. So we've got Harrogate, Bradford and Leeds here are all capitalised at the start. We've also got accurate spelling throughout, so there's quite challenging vocabulary in here, so sort of words such as momentous, spelt correctly, legacy, and also barbecue down here, quite a challenging word to spell. So if we look at this model answer, we can see that it is effective for a number of reasons. So for one, it answers the question. So it addresses all the different things that we need to talk about in the answer, so detailed activities for the celebration, and it asks for other ideas from colleagues. It's the correct text type, so it's got the correct formatting features for an article. It's also got quite a persuasive tone, so we've got a range of different punctuation used, so we've got exclamation marks to make it sound exciting. We've got key details to tell people the information of what's going to be happening and when. It's got an appropriate level of formality, so it's not completely really formal, but it's an appropriate level of formality for the audience and purpose. We've got direct address here with you and your, as well as a rhetorical question, which all help the reader to feel really involved. So if you've already completed this question, you've had a go at writing it, you can use this video and this model answer to think of ways you could improve your answer. If you've not already had a go at the question, then you can use this as a guide, a little bit of a template to have a go yourself. Okay, so let's have a look at the second task for this paper then. So in activity 1, we wanted to write an article. And in activity 2, we want to write a letter. And again, we've got 22 marks possible. So this question says, the drains outside your home are blocked. Every time it rains heavily, there are serious problems for you, your neighbours and motorists. The situation is getting worse every time it rains. Write a letter to the council describing the situation, explaining in detail the problems caused, and requesting that action be taken. The letter should be sent to the Highways Department, Raywood Council, Church Lane, Raywood, RD4BT. Okay, so let's break down what this question is asking us to do a bit more. So, we know that we need to write a letter, and we need to write a letter to the council. So, that is a very formal audience, so we're going to need to make sure that we're writing using formal language. And we need to describe the situation. So, what's going on up here? The situation is described up here, so we need to make sure we're being specific about that. And explaining in detail the problems caused, and we also need to request that action be taken. So we need to say what the problem is and what we want the council to do about it. And then we've also got a recipient's address there that we'll need to include in the letter as well. Okay, so let's look at the mark scheme for activity 2, so our letter. So these sections here, so content and detail, format and structure and so on, are the same. A lot of it will be similar, but obviously things like format, level of formality, that sort of thing might differ slightly. So let's have a look first at content and detail. So again, we've got 5 marks, and we get 1 mark just for staying within that word count range when specified. So we can see here we haven't got a specified word count here, so don't write reams and reams and reams, you don't need to, but there's no specified word count, so you're not going to lose marks for going over any specific word count. So if we look down here, we want to be aiming for 3 or 4 marks, so we need to make sure that the response is detailed and it communicates the information, ideas and opinions clearly, coherently and effectively throughout. So we need to make sure our writing is clear, so we can do that through paragraphs, various organisational markers such as bullet points, and we need to make sure that we're writing in clear, coherent sentences so that the reader can effectively understand what we're trying to say. We also need to fully meet the needs of the purpose and audience, so if we remember in the question, if we go back up to the question, there we go. So we can see that our audience is the council, so a very formal audience there. And our purpose is to sort of describe the situation, so inform them of the situation in detail. And we're also requesting that action be taken, so we're looking to request that action is taken in response. So we've kind of got a dual purpose there. We need to make sure that they're aware of the situation, so inform them. And we also need to persuade or request them to take action in response. Okay, so moving on to format and structure. So for those 3 marks, we need to make sure our structure is clear and effective with an appropriate format which allows for clear communication. So this appropriate format means that we need to accurately match our format to the text type. And here we need to write a letter. So the indicative content is here. So the text needs to have a beginning, middle and end, so a clear structure throughout. The format for a letter, we've got sender's address, so this is our address. You can just make this up if it's not specified in the question, which it isn't here. You can just make one up. Recipient's address, well, we've got that specified in the text. Date, so the date that the letter is being sent, again you can make this up. Salutation is just a fancy word for addressing the person, so basically an appropriate greeting. Close, so for example, thank you for your time, I look forward to hearing from you in response. and then your appropriate sign off and signature. So for formal writing, we would probably use yours sincerely or yours faithfully, respectively. So we would use yours faithfully if we don't know the person we're writing to, so we don't know their name. For example, we're writing Dear Sir, Madam. We would use yours faithfully. And we'd use yours sincerely if we know the person we're writing to by name. Okay, and then next we've got language and register. So for 2 marks here, we need to use language and register, which is fully suited to the audience and purpose. So this is just referring to sort of the level of formality, what sort of techniques that you might use. So for example, if we are trying to inform, we need to use informative language, quite a formal register. Also, if we think about the need to persuade the council to do something about it, we might use personal anecdotes, rhetorical questions, direct address, those sorts of techniques. Okay, and then we've also got organisation. So for 3 marks, the full 3 marks here, we need to use paragraphs effectively and appropriately. We need to construct complex sentences consistently and accurately. And we also need to use organisational markers in an effective way in order to add clarity and establish cohesion in our writing. So paragraphs are used to split up the text, often by topic. So each paragraph should usually start a new topic or a new point. Complex sentences are sentences that have an independent clause followed by a dependent clause, or it could be the other way around, it could be the dependent clause first. So what that means is if your independent clause is some information, so it's the main bit of information in your sentence, and then the dependent clause will add extra information. But the key here is that the dependent clause does not make sense without the independent clause supporting it. So we need to make sure we're using complex sentences in that way in our writing. And then finally, organisational markers. So organisational markers are any words or phrases that split up your writing and make it more cohesive for the reader. Also, it could be things like bullet points, subheadings, lists, that sort of thing. Anything that sort of organises the text and adds clarity for the reader. And then finally, we've also got spelling, punctuation and grammar. So for spelling, for those 3 marks, we need to make sure that our spelling is accurate. So accurate spelling of a range of words, including specialist words, some uncommon words. Competence should be shown in the spelling of possessive pronouns. So for example, he, she, theirs. So you need to make sure that you know the difference between all the 3 different theirs and you're not spelling one and putting one in the wrong context. Any errors are one-offs which do not affect meaning. So you can actually get 3 marks here and still make some errors. It just needs to not be a pattern of errors. Then we've got punctuation. So for those 3 marks for punctuation, we need to use a wide range of punctuation and we need to use that accurately. So we've got a list here, so colons, commas, inverted commas, apostrophes and quotation marks in a variety of sentence structure. So you want to be using as many different sentence structures as you can, so simple sentences, compound sentences and complex sentences for different effects. And then finally for grammar, for those 3 marks, we need to use a full range of grammatical constructions. This just means how your sentences are constructed basically. And we need to use these accurately throughout, which adds to the effectiveness of the document. So including subject-verb agreements, so we need to make sure that when we've got a subject that is plural, the verb that goes with it also needs to be plural. We need to have a consistent use of tense, so don't be flitting between was and is. We need to make sure that we're either in the present tense or the past tense, for example. Definite and indefinite articles, so this just means using either a as an indefinite article or the as a definite article, depending on what the context is and what we're talking about. And then also modality devices, so this is just sort of modal verbs, so verbs such as can, could, may, might, will, shall, would, and so on. So making sure that they are correctly used in your writing. So let's read the model answer we've got here for this question. So we've got our sender's address here, followed by the date, and then we've got the recipient's address that we've been given in the question here underneath on the left hand side. Then we've got the body of our letter, and we've got the appropriate greeting here, so dear sir, madam, because we're unaware of who we're writing to. I'm writing to inform you of an ongoing issue with the drains at the front and rear of my house. Without fail, every single time it rains heavily, my house is virtually flooded, and the problem is only getting worse with each shower of rain, which, as you can imagine, is very often given that we are in the UK. My house is becoming increasingly water damaged as the issue gets worse, meaning my 3 poor children have had to wade through the kitchen at times due to the intensity of the flooding. On multiple occasions, human sewage has risen up to the surface level from the drains, which is not something I want my children to be exposed to. My floors have begun warping as they are wooden, costing me thousands in maintenance and repairs, let alone the eye-watering repainting costs. Additionally, the issue has been impacting my neighbours too. Sewage has been spilling into gardens and resulting in plant life being destroyed and pets getting sick, leading to more costs incurred through veterinary bills and replacing dead plants. As you can imagine, the emotional strain caused by such a sudden financial burden out of our control is enormous. As a result of this, I am requesting immediate and effective action to be taken on behalf of my children and neighbours. This inhumane situation cannot be allowed to continue. Yours faithfully, Jack White. Okay, so let's have a think about how we are fulfilling the marking criteria here. So as we've already mentioned, we've got correct formatting for a letter. So we've got our sender's address here. We can just make that up, it's not specified in the question. And then we've got the recipient's address here, which is in the correct position on the page. And we've also got the date underneath the sender's address. We've got an appropriate greeting. We're not sure who we're writing to, but we know it's formal, so dear sir, madam is perfect for that situation. We've got appropriate paragraphs, so the text is split up into 3 paragraphs, and we've got organisational markers such as additionally here. And then we've got an appropriate sign off here, so yours faithfully is correctly used because we don't know the recipient by name, and then we've got a full name used, which is often the case in formal writing. So the text carries a formal tone throughout, so we've got a lack of contractions with I am instead of I'm with an apostrophe. We've got I'm writing to inform you here, so if you remember, the part of the purpose we're writing is to inform the council of this issue, as well as to persuade and request that they do something about it. We've also fulfilled the question here by informing them of the ongoing issue, and we've described the issue in great detail here as to what's happening with the issue. And we've also got some good persuasive techniques in this paragraph here. So we've got a personal anecdote here, my 3 poor children. The use of the word poor is quite an emotive adjective there. We've also got varied punctuation, so we've got an exclamation mark here, but that also ties in with the persuasive purpose for this paragraph especially. The text also just flows really well. We've got different organisational markers to help the cohesion of the text, so additionally, and then as a result of this, so we've explained the issue here, And then we're saying, as a result of this, I am requesting immediate and effective action. So we're telling the council what we want them to do about it. And we've got more emotive language here, so this inhumane situation, it's really strong. It's going to make the reader feel something on behalf of who's writing it. We've got lots of different sentence types in here, so we've got a great complex sentence here, without fail every single time it rains heavily. So we've got that clause in there. And we've ended on a very simple sentence here, so this inhumane situation cannot be allowed to continue. It's leaving the reader with a lasting impression. That simple sentence is going to really stay with them. So to round up then, this question is answered fully in this answer. So we have described the issue using different persuasive techniques and emotive language to get the reader to really understand how it's impacting on the writer. And then we've also requested immediate and effective action to be taken, which has fully answered the question. The student has also used a range of punctuation, including an exclamation mark, a colon, and a range of sentence types for different effects. The grammar and sentence structure and spelling throughout is accurate, and the text is divided up into 3 well-constructed paragraphs. So if you've already had a go at this question, then you can use this answer and this video to improve your answer that you've already written. Or if you've not had a go yet, use this as a template and think about some of the things that you could include in your own answer.